Just want to say welcome everyone to Weathering the Storm. We're so glad that you're here today as we tackle this pretty crucial topic for home and business owners, especially as hurricane season is already ramping up. Know it's top of mind for a lot of Floridians. And here at Farah Farah, we're committed to helping you protect your biggest investment, your home. That's why we're super excited today to have an expert speaker on the subject, Andreas Study. Andreas is a renowned first-party claims attorney with Farah Farah. He specializes in helping homeowners navigate what can be a really complex property damage claims and ensuring that they get the protection that they deserve. So today, Andreas is just going to provide clear, actionable prepping tips for home and filing claims, as well as understanding your policy and knowing what your rights are. But afterwards, we want to invite everybody. You'll see the chat function at the top of your screen is where you can enter in your questions. And we'd love to get any and all questions that you possibly have. Andreas will set aside some time at the end to run through those. If we don't get to everyone's questions, we'll also give you some instructions there at the end that you can send those in, and we'll make sure to answer those as we can. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started and give a warm welcome to Mr. Andreas Study.
Thanks for that great introduction there, Tyler. So we're here for the Weathering the Storm webinar brought to you by Farah Farah, and we want to make sure everyone stays safe, they stay covered, and this is going to be our guide to hurricane prep and homeowners insurance. So if you could, Tyler, go on to the next screen. So for today's agenda, tell you a little bit about myself. We're going to dive into understanding hurricane season. We're going to talk about how to prepare your home and your family for a hurricane or for hurricane season. We'll talk about navigating your insurance coverage, and we'll actually look at an insurance policy, a sample insurance policy. We'll talk about what to do after the storm when you have a claim. And we'll discuss legal resources and support. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A session where you guys get to ask me questions, and we'll go through them. Next slide, please. So a little bit about myself. So I'm a first-party insurance claim attorney here at Farah Farah in the Orlando office, and I've been doing this for close to a decade. And this is all that I do. I don't do slip and falls. I don't do personal injury. My sole focus is on homeowners insurance claims, commercial insurance claims, things like that. And I find great satisfaction in my job because I literally get to help people put a new roof over their heads after a catastrophe. I'm an Orlando native. I love playing sports. I like being outdoors as much as I can. It's tough being an attorney, but any chance I get, I'm outside with my family, and I like FSU football. So without further ado, let's dive straight into it. So hurricane season is upon us. All right, it runs from June 1st to November 30th, but it's not too late to prepare. Okay. Early preparation is critical, but it does ramp up mid-August to late October. But right now, you should be prepared before, but like I said, it's not too late. And there's some measures that you can put in place to make sure. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. So pre-storm safety measures, what do you need to do before the storm? Really important, you need to build a hurricane kit. What can that include? Water, non-perishable food. We're talking about canned goods, flashlight, batteries for that flashlight, and you need to secure your important documents. Put them in a waterproof bag. We're talking about Social Security cards, insurance policies, all right, and other important documentation. Your medication, you need to secure that as well. You need to have some first aid material in there. You need to update this kit annually. You don't want to crack it open when you really need it and your flashlight's not working because the batteries died or all the quote-unquote non-perishable food has gone bad. So it's important to keep note of that. And I'd like to add one more thing to that. I have one of those flashlights that you kind of crank up or you can squeeze and it provides illumination. You might want to look into that or like a crank radio, add that to your kit. So next slide, please, Tyler. You also want to secure your property, all right? You want to reinforce windows and doors. You want to trim your trees. I usually do it in the spring. and have an arborist come by. You want to clear your gutters. You want to reduce the overall risk of damage, not only to your property, but to your neighbor's property. We don't want a bunch of things flying around. You want to identify a secure area in your home, and you want to bring in all your patio furniture, any hanging plants. You want to bring them into your garage or some secure area, because those can fly around and cause significant damage, not only to your property, but your neighbor. So identify a secure area in your home for you and your pets. This is an area without windows, okay? So try to find an area without windows in a hallway, or sometimes in a bathroom with limited amount of windows, and you want to hunker down. You want to identify this area before, because you don't want to be running around looking for a safe place when catastrophe happens. You want to know exactly where that is before. Okay, next slide, please. Pre-storm safety measures. You want to plan an evacuation route and establish a family communication plan. You want to tell your family, hey, this is where I'm going to be if something happens, and stay in communication with them. You want to find your evacuation zone, and you can do that at floridadisaster.org. It lists all the evacuation routes and evacuation zones. And if an evacuation order is not issued for your area, you may consider sheltering in place. And just because no evacuation has been ordered doesn't mean that you shouldn't potentially evacuate. Hurricanes, natural disasters, they're catastrophes, right? They're hard to gauge, right? And so you need to be able to find shelter when you need to. So realize that these are chaotic events, right? Things can change in a snap. Next slide, please, Tyler. Insurance basics. So now we're getting into what you need to know about your insurance policy and about the claims practice. When you have an insurance claim, it's important that you take photos, okay? And you want to do that before too, all right? Take photos of your home and your belongings beforehand, and document the condition before the storm. Right? Keep a detailed home inventory for smoother claims, right? Next slide, please, Tyler. So now we're getting into the insurance policy. This is a policy breakdown. This isn't a sample declarations page of an insurance policy. And you have the various sections here, and we'll get into those in more detail. One important section, it's at the end, it's the forms and endorsements section. And in law school, one of my professors said, the devil is always in the details. And that's true for these insurance policies. They are a minefield of exclusions, okay? And the forms and endorsements section includes amendments to the policy that could affect the entire policy, and they will supersede or rule over all the other language in the policy. So the forms and endorsements section of the policy is also pretty important. But let's get into some of the more basic items here. So the first, total annual policy premium. All right, that's $854. That's what you pay each year. And then the next portion is your hurricane portion of your premium. That's the portion of your premium that goes towards, that's the portion of the $854 that goes towards the actual hurricane event, actual hurricane coverage. And the next line of importance is non-hurricane portion of your premium. So this sample policy has $505 that have to do with non-hurricane related items. What can that be? Well, I see dozens and dozens of claims each month, and we get claims ranging from fires, lightning strikes, water damage claims where pipes burst, roof claims where there's hail. I've even had cars run into homes. So that non-hurricane portion of your premium, that goes towards covering those other things other than hurricanes. So the next line item here is under section 1, property coverages. We have coverage A, dwelling. That's the four corners of your home, right? That's where you guys live. And what we have here is we have two sections. We have limit of liability, and then we have premium. So the premium is $854 $59. Okay, that's your coverage A. That's basically part of your premium that you're paying. And the limit of liability is the maximum that this policy would pay. It's your policy cap. And the maximum that this sample policy will pay for your home, your dwelling, the four corners where you actually sleep, put your head down, is $160,000. And if we move on to coverage B, other structures, there's a limit of liability of $3,200. And if you look at the premium, that's included. So $3,200 is the cap, is the most that this policy pays for other structures. And you might be asking, hey, what are other structures? So other structures typically are things that are detached from the home by clear space. These can be gazebos and sheds, maybe a detached garage. And so this policy has a policy cap of $3,200 for things like that. So we'll move on to coverage C, personal property. So personal property, pretty much anything movable inside your home. Couches, your CDs, if you have CDs, all right, dishes, TVs. This is your personal property, your clothing. And this policy, under limit of liability, will pay $104,250. That's the most you can get if everything inside your home, as far as your contents, has been totaled. And then we'll move on to coverage D, which is loss of use. Okay, this is the type of coverage that pays out when you cannot use your home because it's so substantially damaged, or a portion of your home. Say, for instance, you have a huge water damage claim and you do your best to prevent mold from growing, but mold grows, and you have someone come out and they tell you, hey, you got to move out of here. I'm a mold professional, I'm a mold assessor, and we sent mold samples to the lab and they're telling you you need to get out of here. Okay, so you have black mold or something along those lines. So coverage D, loss of use, kicks in if you're not able to use a portion of your home or you have to vacate. Say your home is substantially damaged by a fire and you no longer have a roof, or your walls are burned down. Coverage D covers you if you need to go and stay at a hotel. Now, usually these policies require you to show receipts. So this is usually payable on a show me basis. Insurance company's going to say, hey, you had to leave, you need to show me. So it's very document driven. The next item I want to talk about is ordinance or law. So that's 25% of coverage A under this policy. So that means 25% of your coverage A limit of liability, that's what they're going to pay on this policy. So that equals $40,000. And so what's ordinance or law? Well, ordinance and law coverage, or I like to call it law and ordinance coverage, kicks in if the local building department says, hey, buddy, you need to do certain things on your home if you're doing repairs. So if code enforcement says your window's broken, you can't just replace that one window, you have to replace all of them. Typical policies will not cover you unless you have this law and ordinance coverage. It's the increased cost that you incur as a homeowner in order to meet local building codes and requirements. So the next section we can dive into are your deductibles. That's really important. Most policies have two types of deductibles. The first one we dive into is the all perils deductible. That applies to everything other than a hurricane, pipe bursts, fires, cars running into your homes, things of that nature, hail claims. And this sample policy has $1,000. Okay, so what happens? Say your claim's worth $10,000 and you have a $1,000 deductible. Typically, you don't cut a check to the insurance company. But at the end of the day, when they're ready to settle, if you have a $1,000 deductible and you have a claim that's worth $10,000, you'd be entitled to a $9,000 payout. And so the next item is hurricane deductible. Typically, in Florida, it's 2% of your coverage A, but we see policies where it differs. So 2% of coverage A of the $160,000 is $3,200. And so when a hurricane comes by, a $3,200 hurricane deductible is applied. Now, it's worth noting that this hurricane deductible, if we have multiple hurricanes throughout a season, you only pay your hurricane deductible once. So there's a little nugget of information. You pay your hurricane deductible once throughout a policy period or each season. So next, we'll go into sinkhole. So this policy, sinkhole's not covered, and we've seen a reduction in sinkhole coverages under a lot of these policies. And so we'll move on to the next policy provision. Okay, so next we're going to talk about, sorry, we skipped ahead there. So on to the next one, please, Tyler. So next we're talking about weathering the storm. And what's important is you need to stay tuned to local news and official weather updates. You need to follow evacuation orders. Don't wait till the last minute. You want to stay prepared. If sheltering at home, stay in your safe zone, the safe zone we talked about earlier. Like I said, stay away from windows and doors. Use battery-powered lights instead of candles. You want to reduce the risk of fire. It seems odd after a hurricane, but a lot of times there's down power lines. There could be oil or fuel spilt. I've seen cases where there's diesel fuel spilt from actual boats that are supposed to be in water, but they find themselves on land due to storm surge. And down power lines plus a combustible source can cause fire. So sometimes you'll see fires happen after a hurricane, even though everything's wet. If things are flammable, they'll catch fire and you'll have a fire on hand. So be really careful and try to avoid fire risks. So use those battery powered lights, or like I said, little crank up radio or crank up flashlights. On the next slide, please, Tyler. What to do after the storm. These are post-storm actions. Check in with your friends and family when it's safe to do so. Check in on your pets. Watch for hazards, like I said earlier, down power lines and unstable structures. Your roof might not be stable. If you could see through it, I've seen lots of scenarios like in this picture where the roof's compromised. You need to get away from that area, okay? Because your roof might come down, a wall might come down. So if you think the structure of your home's compromised, you need to get out of there. You need to document your property damage. You need to take photos. So what we talked about earlier is you have the before photos, and this is the after photos. Take the take photographs of the damage to your property. All right. And you also want to take steps to prevent further damage. Why? Because a lot of these policies require you to what's called mitigate your damages. You need to prevent further damage from occurring. What does that look like? Well, you need to be reasonable about it, right? If your roof's leaking, you need to throw up a tarp. And you need to promptly report damage to your insurance company. A lot of these policies have what's called a prompt reporting requirement. What does that mean? As soon as you reasonably can, you need to call in your claim, you need to send an email or write in a letter. All right. A lot of these insurance companies, fax as well. A lot of these insurance companies have multiple ways to notify them of your claim. Make sure that claim is put in. I usually do it by two ways. I send an email and we send out a letter. We want to make sure that the insurance company gets that notice of the claim because of these prompt notice requirements. You put the claim in as quickly as you can. And the reason why is because an insurance company, they will come in. If you filed your claim, you decided to wait, I'll wait till next week, I'll wait till next month. They'll come and they'll start complaining. Oh, why didn't you call it in right away? And they can use that as a means to reduce payment or maybe even deny the claim. So it's important to get that claim in. Next slide, please, Tyler. Common insurance tactics. All right. These are what the insurance companies use to try to avoid payment. They try to limit payment. And ultimately, their most important tool is delay processing the claim. All right, this is the key thing. This is their MO. This is what they love doing, is delaying the process. They love to blame damage on the damage to your home on pre-existing damage, wear and tear, on your failure to maintain the property, or someone else's work on faulty construction or faulty materials. So just be aware of that. Another common tactic is lowball offers. And finally, changing adjusters. I call it the adjuster shuffle, right? So you'll have one adjuster start off and they'll reassign it. And then that new adjuster that was just reassigned the file might ask you for all the documents or all the information you gave to the other adjuster. And they see it as, oh, we can just press the reset button, buy ourselves some more time. So just be aware of that, right? And you could always, if it was sent through an email, just go back to your email, edit and resend it to a new recipient. So it's important to have your files organized so that you can adjust to this. Next slide, please, Tyler. So how do we combat these tactics from the insurance company? Well, we went through the basics of your policy, and you need to understand your policy and understand the claim practice so you can avoid being caught off guard. The insurance company typically has 60 days to pay or deny your insurance claim. So be aware of that. Now, the statute says that there are factors that they can use that are beyond their control to extend that. But typically, insurance company has 60 days to pay or deny your claim. You need to keep a log of all your communications with your insurance adjuster and the insurance company so that when the insurance company plays these delay games, you could tell them, look, I sent it to you on such and such date. You can call them out because a lot of times these claims are very document driven. Like I said earlier, insurance company always says, show me. So because you keep a log of all your communications, you can show them, hey, I sent this over to the last adjuster if they're pulling the adjuster's shuffle. Be prepared to dispute low settlement offers. The insurance company, they will hire professionals to come and evaluate your claim. These insurance professionals, if they're an insurance adjuster, are typically bound by ethical duties. They're supposed to give you a fair shake. The insurance company will also employ engineers, maybe roofers. And it's important to know that those engineers, those roofers, and typically anyone that the insurance company sends to your property, they're being paid by the insurance company. They might be biased. So it's important that you either contact an attorney or some of the other professionals who specializes in property damage, because you don't want to go up against the insurance company on your own. The insurance company roofer says, hey, we can just patch this roof and you'll be on your way, and you have a broken truss. You need to know that, hey, you probably need an engineer to take a look at that broken truss. And sometimes the insurance company's roofer might not want you to know that or might not provide that information to you. So that's important that you always ask questions. You know your truss is broken. Ask the insurance company's roofer or adjuster, hey, this truss is broken. Should we get an engineer out here? Just always ask questions and don't always take it for face value. Always verify. Ask questions and always try to verify the answer. Next slide, please. Legal support and resources. You don't have to go about it alone. You can seek legal help if your insurance claim is unfairly denied or underpaid. And here at Fair and Fair, we offer free consultations. No out-of-pocket cost to you. And we'll take a look at your insurance claim, and we'll even take a look at your policy before you have a claim. What to expect when hiring an attorney? Well, we handle disputes with the insurance adjusters. We challenge lowball offers and delays. We hire our own professionals to tell the insurance company's professionals, you guys got it wrong. And we represent you in court if needed. We look at your insurance policy and we make sure that you get the fair shake. Next slide, please, Tyler. So what do I want you guys to take away from this? The key takeaways. Early preparation is very important. Safety and planning saves lives, property. And you need to make sure you get ahead of storm season. You need to know your policy. You need to know what you're covered for. You need to know your policy limits, and you need to know your deductible. When you're up for renewal, sit down with your insurance agent, make sure you have all the coverages. We talked about law and ordinance coverage. There's a lot of insurance policies with no law and ordinance coverage. You need to make sure you have that. Because like I said, the increased costs that you have to pay in order to meet local code enforcement, you don't want to be out of pocket for that. That could be quite expensive. You need to document everything. Remember the before and afters. Photos, notes on your claim. Those are all going to be very important tools in making sure that the insurance company doesn't delay your claim, doesn't give you a lowball offer. These are all things you need to do to protect your most important asset, which is typically your home. Insurance companies may push back. Stand your ground. Know your policy, know your claim, and know what your claim's worth. And know that legal support, legal help is available. You don't have to face the insurance company alone. You can call us at Farah Farah and we'll step in. And next slide, please. So everything we talked about is on our hurricane season prep guide. We have this QR code. You just take your phone and you snap it and it'll pop up and give you a list of what you need to do to prepare for hurricane season. And I think we're just about ready to get into the Q&A session, Tyler. So if you could, any questions? Now, remember, if you have a question, just go into the top of your screen here, and there's a chat box in between people and pop out. And just write your question, and the floor is open. There are no silly questions. This is what I do for a living. And I hope to have a lot of questions here so that I can educate everyone here today. So Tyler, could you read me the first question?
Sure. Our first question today: if you aren't in a flood zone, would you recommend having flood insurance as a backup? Sherry asks.
Well, so these flood zones aren't always updated by our federal agencies. So if you notice, if the problem is it's very expensive, right? It's very expensive. So if you have disposable income to do it, you might as well do it. But if you're tight and you have no history of flooding and no federal agencies have told you to expect flooding, then I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But if you come out one day and there is a heavy storm and you notice a lot of water pooling and it's not going away, you might want to start asking questions about whether, this area has flooded historically. And in that circumstance, you might want to start talking to your insurance agent about maybe getting flood insurance. But if you have a mortgage, you might not have a choice about that. So sometimes your mortgage company will require you to have flood insurance if you're in a flood zone, or if certain requirements aren't met. Next question, please, Tyler.
Well, this is something I was curious about, Andreas. I saw this in our neighborhood last year with the hurricanes, where a tree in my neighbor's yard, a tree in his yard fell on his neighbor's house. Would that be his responsibility or the neighbor's?
Okay, so the question is, if my tree falls on a neighbor's house, whose responsibility is it from a homeowner's insurance perspective, right?
Precisely.
Okay. All right. So if your tree falls on a neighbor's property, typically what happens is your neighbor will file a claim with his own insurance company, and the neighbor's insurance company would then file a claim and issue a payment to your neighbor. And then the neighbor's insurance company might then seek what they paid out to your neighbor from your insurance company. And it's called a subrogation action. And usually that whole process, it's kind of outside of my wheelhouse, because what happens is it becomes a third party claim at that point, and your insurance company steps in to defend you against the neighbor. And then it becomes, well, was that tree rotting? Were you on notice? And it becomes sort of like a negligence situation of, hey, was that tree leaning over? Did you know about it? Did you take measures to make sure that tree didn't fall? Or did a hurricane come by, an act of God, and take it down? And so usually in the act of God, that your neighbor's insurance might be in a tougher situation. But if that tree's rotting, it's got woodpecker holes all over it, and tree branches have been periodically falling down, and maybe a tree trimmer came by and said, hey, that tree needs to come down, and you said, forget about it. It's been up here it's been standing for a couple years. It's fine. That case of negligence is building up against you. So good question. But typically you file a claim against your own insurance when something like that happens to your home. And if your insurance company needs to subrogate, they'll go ahead and subrogate against an at-fault party. So great question. Next question.
Remember, you can enter your questions in the chat box at the top. You can push that button, and any question for Andreas is on the table. But while we wait for those, Andreas, another one I thought of. So living here in Florida, a storm, as soon as it passes, me and my neighbors, we all get out with our chainsaws, and you're chopping up tree limbs and stuff like that. If, by accident, I'm cutting down a tree that was kind of leaning or on something, and I damage the property further, if, it falls and hits the corner of my house or something, would that be under the hurricane coverage, or since it's post-hurricane, would it be under just regular coverage?
Right. So good question. So that's sort of like so when you take the bar exam, when I took it, there was an essay section, and it usually had some sort of really difficult factual scenario that you had to talk about. So this is like the Florida bar essay question here. So it depends, and it's very, very fact specific. So if damage occurs to the property after the hurricane, typically it can be viewed as a separate claim. So I've seen scenarios where maybe a car backs into a home, and it could be the tree trimmer, right? The tree trimmer is backing in their truck, and they'll hit the home. And that, I would argue, and it's, the insurance company, they're going to argue it's a hurricane claim, but I would argue that would be a separate claim, and it would fall under the all other perils deductible. It wouldn't be applicable to your hurricane deductible. But it's important to know, though, that there's usually like a 72-hour window for hurricane claims. So if any of the national weather reporting services issue a hurricane warning in any area of the state, say in Pensacola, there's a hurricane warning issued by NOAA, and you live over in Miami, and there's something wind related, say a day after the hurricane passes through Pensacola, usually there's a 72-hour window where anything that's wind related, the insurance company can lawfully apply a hurricane deductible to that claim. So that's why with Hurricane Milton, when it was spawning all these tornadoes in West Palm, Volusia, Brevard County, that's why a lot of those people were getting hurricane deductibles applied to their tornado claim, because within 72 hours of a hurricane warning issued by one of these federal agencies, an insurance company can apply a hurricane deductible to wind-related events. So those tornadoes, wind-related events, if they happen within 72 hours, you can apply the hurricane deductible. So it's important to know that. And I know I was getting a lot of phone calls after Milton from that. It's like, hey, can they apply this hurricane deductible? I said, yes, they can. If it was a tornado, they can apply that hurricane deductible if it occurred within 72 hours of the hurricane warning. Any more questions, Tyler?
We do. We have another one popped in from Amanda. How do I tell the difference between which policy should cover an issue? For example, flood insurance versus home insurance, or hurricane clause, or any other additional coverage?
Okay, so this is, it can be complicated, right? I guess you can imagine that a lot of these disputes that end up in court are because we cannot distinguish flood from wind after a hurricane. How I like to do it, and I like to put it in really simple terms, make it really digestible, is top-down damage, okay? If you have top-down damage, it's typically wind-related. And what does top-down damage look like? Top-down damage could be ceiling stains. Your windows are compromised and you're getting water coming in from the hurricane due to that. And you see little drips and little stains on your drywall, on your paint. So top-down damage, I typically attribute to wind, and it falls under your typical homeowner's insurance policy. Bottom-up damage falls within those exclusions in your homeowner's insurance policy that are attributed to flood. And if you have flood insurance, the bottom-up damage would fall under your flood insurance policy, which is typically separate. The majority of your homeowner's insurance policies, about 99.9% of them, do not cover flood. Okay, that bottom-up damage. They typically just cover that top-down damage if we're dealing with wind events. So good question. I'm glad you asked it. It's important to kind of know that distinction, and it's also important, because it's complicated, to distill it and make it as simple as possible in terms of top-down or bottom-up. Because if you have any water pooling on the surface of your home and it seeps into your home, unfortunately, how these homeowners insurance policies define them is they'll typically broadly define them as flood damage. So great question. Thanks for asking. Any more, Tyler?
All right. No more questions at this time, but just a reminder that you can enter in your questions in the chat box up at the top of your screen. Just click on it. You can type your answer or question, and Andreas will answer it. We'll give just another minute or two to get in those final questions.
Mm-hmm. And like I said earlier, if I missed anything, if I went too fast, there's always that QR code on a previous slide that you guys can go to, and it'll give you our basic guide on how to stay safe through this hurricane season. It's our hurricane prep guide.
Okay, Andreas, it doesn't look like we have any further questions.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. I know your time is very valuable. I'd like to do more of these. I want to educate as many people as I can. And if you have any suggestions, shoot us an email, and hopefully we can add that to the next webinar. And obviously, if you have any more questions too, shoot us an email and we'll get to it and hopefully get to you as quickly as we can. And if not, we'll address it at the next webinar. So thank you all. Thank you for your time.